want to talk about university-supported journalism as an innovation engine. As we're thinking about how to piece together this news ecosystem, wherever you like, in the aftermath of all that's happened in local news and civic information, we do want to take a look at the university as another really crucial part of the ecosystem that exists in all of our states and communities. Love to introduce the panel. We've got Geeta, Anand, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author. She's the dean of Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. Welcome. We've got Katherine and Rowlands, president of Bay City News, also a former Knight Journalism Fellow. Welcome. And we've got Elodie Mailliet Storm, executive director of CatchLight, which you've heard a little bit about. We've seen some of their beautiful work. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us. Elodie and Kat, and maybe Kat, we'll start with you. I want you to talk a little bit about the Knight Fellowship that you had, what you were doing before, and sort of how that time in the university kind of inflected what you did afterwards.
Well, it's been an amazing time, and some people call it the best year of their life.
I've heard that. I've heard that. How many Knight Fellows do we have
There's
in here?
a lot.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
It's hard to argue with that sentiment. It was really a chance to get off of the treadmill and think bigger. Think about big challenges in journalism, think about your own career, but also have this incredible cohort of other fellows and the vast resources of the university at your disposal to explore challenges and problems and figure out some solutions. So when I started, my incoming question had to do with how to get more women into news leadership roles, because the numbers are pretty dire. And although more women than men are entering journalism, it's really hard to advance to the point where you can make decisions, make change. And so I wanted to figure out how to move the needle on that. And I did do that work. However, about halfway through my year, I learned that the place where I started my career, which was Bay City News as a college intern, might be for sale. So I thought about it for about a second and said, I want to figure out how to buy it.
Yeah.
So I did.
Wow. Can you just tell people briefly, for those who aren't in the Bay Area, like Bay City News, what's the role that you play in the ecosystem here?
Yeah, so I think about our role as kind of a backbone of the news ecosystem. We cover 12 counties. We have 24-hour-a-day coverage, and we distribute verified, very transparently reported news to everybody else. So TV, radio, print, digital, and that way we have a tremendous distribution power to get important news, whether it's public safety, disaster response, or more importantly, these days is really important civic news. And how do you support our local democratic institutions with reporting on what's happening at City Hall, what's happening in communities. So by distributing all that news with on-the-ground reporting, we're able to really help everybody else fill in the gaps in their own coverage and bring those threads together to make a difference.
That's awesome. Elodie, why don't you describe what you were doing before and then the Knight inflection?
No, for sure. So before going to GSK and coming out west, I was at Getty Images in various roles for about 12 years, and very much on the business side. So I was initially in charge of Contour, which was Getty Images' high-end portraiture and exclusive imagery division. So I was the one that people would call when a big event would happen and say, get me the most, incredible exclusive image out there. And I would have like the editor of Time magazine and Newsweek on the phone saying, we want to pay that much against each other, and in the middle of bidding wars, which was a very different time from where we are.
Awesome. Yeah.
Now, it was amazing, a little stressful at times. I had to call the editor of Time once to say, I'm sorry, Newsweek has the same cover and you need to pull you need to stop the press. And that happened, for various reasons. But it was amazing, but it was also a testament to what the economy of media was at the time, which was extremely strong, and people were really competing on coverage to get people's attention, and were using visuals for that purpose. And then at Getty, I slowly moved into actually managing all the content partnerships that Getty had with large media organizations, including National Geographic and the Washington Post, and sort of saw this move from one-off licensing, people competing on one-off images, to large subscription deals, and like the need for images to get so much more into volume. But also in my conversations with National Geographic, the Washington Post, and so many other organizations, Getty had about 300 content partners, I could see a massive shift happening in the ecosystem and how much their business models were being challenged. And I think at the time it was both like a shift in the industry, but also in my personal life, where I had 2 small kids and suddenly was a media executive in New York with 2 small kids and having a pretty stressful life. And so at the time I had a connection. We actually had a partnership with Instagram and did the first Instagram grant. And one of our partners there, Teru Kuwayama, said, well, you know, there's a lot going on in your mind. Why don't you apply for the GSK fellowship? And so I went and really looked at this question of what does the economy and the opportunity for photography and visuals become in the age of Instagram and the platforms. And the opportunity there that the GSK fellowship allowed me to have is obviously like being able to talk to so many experts and the tech people that knew so much about the economy of platforms and where that was going. So that was transformational. And then, you know, it was also about building partnerships and understanding so much more from the ground up from my co-fellows, like where the ecosystem was going from their perspective and the challenges that we were seeing in local visual journalism. Concurrently, I met Nancy Ferris, who is also in the house, who was the founder of CatchLight, is now the board chair, and we started discussing CatchLight. I became a part of the advisory board, and looking at the challenges that's in the ecosystem and this sort of really massive question, which is, we know that communication is becoming visual. We know that images have the power to really inform people, connect people to issues, but yet the media ecosystem was completely underinvesting. So we lost more visual journalists than any other part of the newsrooms from 2002 to about 2019. We lost about 50%, 52% of visual journalists in newsrooms. And the new ecosystem that was getting rebuilt was getting, in the nonprofit sector, was getting rebuilt without that really important factor. So we're like, how do we actually try and power visual journalism at the local level? And I think one of the other things that Stanford and that year taught me was the importance of pilots. And the importance of doing things at a small scale to figure out, does it actually work or does it not work? Our assumption was, if we put a visual journalist in the newsroom, it's going to do 2 things. One is going to start having like amazing images that will have increased engagement rates and really get people engaging with the stories. But then because of that, it will increase the sustainability of the outlet. And so we were lucky enough to be able to put a cohort of 3 newsrooms, among which Bay City News was one, where we put visual journalists initially just for a period of 3 months to start testing, like what does that actually look like and how do we best support them? And so we're now, thanks to that, in a situation where we have actually 6 visual journalists in 6 different newsrooms here across the state of California, many of which are here, and then we're about to go to 9, and we're really pushing for a national expansion next.
We'll come back to talking about these organizations. It's like, Dean Anand. This is, I mean, you have an amazing story to tell us that is about getting a new pool of money allocated from the state, $25 million. Tell us like kind of how it came about to get that pool of money to support journalism at the university.
A lifetime experience. But it was July or August of last year when I got a call from Senator Glazier's office saying, we've been working to try get $25 million for local journalism, and there's all kinds of complications, and it's not going to happen. would the journalism school be interested in receiving this money to give out to local journalists?
You're like, hold on, I'll get back to you.
So the idea then was the journalism school to receive it, to give it out to local journalism. And I said, I would love to. I'm passionate about local journalism. Let me check with the chancellor. And it turned out that we can't be a pass-through. Like the state can't receive money from the state to give out. Like, why? So, but what was going on at the time was we have as a mission at the journalism school trying to change who gets to be a journalist in this world. And we have a very diverse student body. 50% of them were Pell Grant recipients as undergrads. 50% are BIPOC. But the challenge is supporting them enough while they're at the school and leave to actually become journalists, like not having them leave with a massive amount of debt, so they have to take jobs elsewhere. What's the point? Why are we even doing all of this? So as part of our campaign, our fundraising campaign, one part is like more scholarships. One part is more funding while they're there, so they're not working 3 jobs and can't even go to class. And the third part is giving them stipends to work in local journalism. And that's the part that I then presented to Senator Glazer. I said, would you be interested in supporting fellowships for our graduates to go work in local journalism in California? And he said 2 things. He said, can you do it statewide? It can't just be for Berkeley. And I said, absolutely, yes, that makes sense. We would want to do that. And 2, can you stand it up
tomorrow?
Immediately.
Yeah.
Like by the spring. And I said, absolutely, yes, we're journalists. We work fast. We can do it. And that's what we've been doing. Wow. So it was part of our campaign anyway. And I had been talking to the provost and the chancellor about it when I talked to them before the funding opportunity about our fundraising campaign, and I had talked about this third part, these stipends to work in local journalism. The provost's eyes lit up and he was like, oh, you're talking about a postdoc. And in the academic world, it made sense.
It made sense,
and
yeah.
I, coming from 30 years in journalism, and I'm relatively new, I can no longer say totally new to academia, like I just love the way these things interface, so it made sense. So we are now sending 40 fellows or postdocs into local journalism as UC employees with UC benefits using all of this funding. But,
wow.
Yeah.
So you've got 40 folks. Are they all graduates of the school, or how did you stand up the process for actually getting the pool?
So, as you all know, key to standing up anything is great people. So we hired an amazing person. Many of you might know Krista Scharfenberg, who was at the Center for Investigative Reporting for many years. She happened to be making a job transition, so we grabbed her. You can do amazing things at universities. I tell all the great people we hire, you can get exceptions to hire fast. And I convinced the provost that we had to get someone on board in weeks, not months. So on she came, and we've just run like crazy. So what we've done is created an advisory board that's a working advisory board made up of educators in journalism from around the state, as well as local news outlets from around the state. There are 15 or 20 of them. And they chose, we did marketing, created a process, invited people to apply invited local news outlets to apply to be considered to receive fellows, and also invited early career journalists. They can not just be our graduates, and we tried to lower the bar so that you have to be a high school graduate. That's it. That was new to the university for the postdoc program. But we argued that, I wish I could have taken that
Some people
away.
have the work experience that it totally makes sense.
Yeah. You have the work, and that's journalism is an apprenticeship, and that's what all of us believe. So we stood up this process quickly. With the university figuring out, but getting the help of the provost and chancellor to bypass a lot of processes to create this new postdoc program with official application processes. And we had 200 people apply for the 40 fellow positions, and about 100 newsrooms applied to receive the 40 fellows. And in the future, we'll choose the newsrooms first and then the fellows. But we had to do both together.
Yeah.
And as I was telling you earlier this morning, trying to match the people selected to be fellows with the newsroom selected to receive them both at the same time has been challenging, but that's what's going on right now. We're doing the matching. We've almost finished.
So pretty soon you'll be able to tell everyone, okay, here's all the fellows and here's where they're going.
In a couple of days.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a couple of weeks ago, but the fellows had different ideas for where they wanted to go. And it's got to work for both, right? I mean,
right.
We want this to be an important stepping stone, an important job for our graduates and early career journalists, but it has to be where they want to go too. And it also has to support local journalism, mostly in underserved communities in the state.
Is there going to be a process to sort of report back to the university and the broader community, like, here's what happened when we did this?
Yes, there is. We're also working on a process of assessing the impact on democracy, the impact of a program like this on democracy in terms of, does it, do more people vote in communities, and those kinds of things.
Sure.
So we're putting that in place, and absolutely, I think we will report out, and we should, but we're building the plane as we're flying. So do I know what that process is yet? Sure. I do not.
So as we're talking about these little engines of innovation in all these different places, Kat, I wanted to talk to you about how you're sort of morphing the news org to try and respond to this democratic need that we have for more civic information. Talk to us a little bit more about localnewsmatters.org.
Yeah, so Bay City News, as some of you may know, is actually a legacy organization that started in 1979. So it's been around for all that time, doing more or less the same kinds of breaking news coverage and a really important verified calendar of events to sort of set the agenda for what is important happening every day. But coming out of the JSK program, I mentioned earlier, it was an opportunity to think bigger. And so when you see how many vast deserts there are that are forming and how much need there is for community coverage, the trick was to figure out how can we expand our own capacity, our own resources, and do more journalism. So creating a nonprofit, Bay City News Foundation, to live alongside the legacy company has allowed us to grow by 50% in every way. Wow. In terms of our clients, our geography, our staffing, our budget, and all of that money goes into the public service work that is so needed. So on localnewsmatters.org, which is the public-facing free site, there's no advertising, there's no paywall, there's no subscription requirement. It's really meant to be a pure public service and also to be a great reader experience. So it's very visual, thanks to partnerships like with CatchLight. It also has opportunities to build in audio and video as we expand. But information hubs have actually been a really critical component. So it started with COVID. What do people need where they live? So you should be able to click into Alameda County, for example, which has different restrictions than San Francisco. So how do you find what you really need as a consumer? And that worked so well, building in databases, infographics, stories, visuals, and resource lists that we duplicated it over and over again. So we created one for drought and wildfire. We created one for libraries. We've created one for civic engagement. And that one, I think, has the greatest potential in this moment. It's not just what happens before, during, and after an election, but how else can the community become engaged, involved, and express their concerns, and then figure out how to find solutions.
So before, the distribution challenges were sort of taken up by your partners in the traditional business side, right? How do you've got this great information, you've got these dashboards and information hubs. You're also a new digital publisher. How are you finding your readers?
Partnerships, slow growth. We have newsletters, we're on social, we're doing what every other sort of public-facing outlet does. But we don't think it's a good idea to reinvent the wheel. We should be working with people who are also in communities so that we can share stories and information. And in some cases even talk to them like, well, if you cover this, we can cover that. And that helps build audience too. We have a significant investment in Stockton, but we have as subscribers to the Newswire, the Stockton Record and Stocktonia.org, the nonprofit there. And so we're working with them to help support the community. And we have a photographer and a reporter who live there and really get to know the community. So we're right now doing a community survey to find out what more they need. So that all feeds into the loop.
That's cool. Elodie, this is the challenge question, right? There's, we know that visual journalism, visual everything on the internet is very important. But the kind of main way that non-journalists sort of monetize all that stuff, like taking advantage of that influencer economy, is we're sort of like uniquely unable to do that. So what do you think the business model ends up looking like for supporting visual journalism kind of as we go forward?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important question. And that's why I think it's so important for us to actually be operating in the nonprofit sector. So what we're trying to establish really is a new collaborative way of doing visual journalism. So the way that we've established the program is that similarly to what Berkeley is doing, is we actually help subsidize the salary of visual journalists going into newsrooms for 2 years or 3 years initially. So at a like reducing scale over time to show the newsroom that this investment that you are making at a reduced rate will pay off in the long run. So that's something that will help essentially the sustainability of the newsroom, because again, the engagement hopefully goes up. You're able to be on more channels. Like we see the followers, for example, we're talking about the influencer economy, of those outlets actually go up quite significantly, right? So the Salinas, Californian, when David Rodriguez started, was at 4,000 followers. It's at about 8,000, 9,000 now. So the power of images to actually increase audience on those channels is real. And then the other piece is that ultimately we see, for example, the 6 fellows that we're supporting currently have produced over 175 assignments. So that's a lot of images being produced by our fellows. And ultimately, the goal would be for these images to also be shared across newsrooms. So we're able to establish ways in which the economy can start working on a collaborative model.
Mm-hmm. Geeta, when we think about the university as a place for doing some of these things, I mean, what's the argument you make that those dollars, I mean, in this case, you're right, the dollars came to you because you were, the senator needed a solution to a problem. But in general, when you're going to people who are exploring new digital, innovative journalism things, how do you make the argument that the university is a good home for those things?
I've thought this since the day I arrived at Berkeley. I have just a strong background in local news. I spent many years in local news, and already the university the journalism school operated 2 local news websites in Richmond and Oakland that the students ran and the faculty ran. I just think universities are centers of innovation. We have passionate students who are thinking and challenging us in different ways. Universities, particularly public universities, have a community service mission. It's one of the 3 pillars. And as a journalist passionate about local journalism, I think that a key way the university can serve their public service mission is by supporting local journalism in the areas in which they are located. So I see us as being just a key part of the solution for supporting local journalism. If we can band together as educators in journalism and spread out into the communities where we're located, we can help support local journalism and be innovators in many different ways. We have great students who are great photographers and audio journalists and podcasters and documentary filmmakers and video journalists and narrative writers and faculty of all professors, and also access to this giant expertise across the university. So by building those collaborations, not being silos on our campus either, but reaching across our campus and bringing that expertise into journalism and then into the communities around us. So my argument is that we have access to the brilliance of the university, and we have access to these brilliant, passionate, challenging young minds, eager to do things differently and determined to have an impact and a positive impact on the community, so that we are great engines for innovation.
Yeah. Kat, one of the things that you're sort of famous for is knowing lots of people in the Bay Area journalism and media space. And you get to, encounter people at the beginning of their career, kind of mid-career, people who've been in the game for a long time. What are you saying to people at the sort of beginning of their career now about how things are going? And what are you saying to people who are maybe mid-career and are now caught in this turbulence of, our current journalistic landscape?
Well, I'm an optimist, first of all. I think you have to be.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's easy, but there's no better life than being a journalist. Really, truly. It is so fun. There is so much that you can do to make a difference. So that's actually what I tell interns who come on board. Last year we had 10 paid interns. In the summer, 35 total in the 5 years that I've been running Bay City News. And we have another crop coming in this week, actually, and they come from Berkeley, Stanford, CUNY, all over the country, the Emma Bowen Foundation, Dow Jones News Fund, and what they bring is not only an eagerness to learn how to be journalists and tell stories, but they also just want to try things. So I try to just say yes, no matter what the story or the idea or the project might be, because it's an experiment.
And you can always kill it later.
Actually, some of the best things that we've started continue to this day, and some of the interns that we hired for the summer are now full-time employees. And some of our interns actually start late in life. They are second career journalists as well as the just college graduate.
Just on an organizational level, does the nonprofit own the for-profit, or does the for-profit own the nonprofit?
They live side by side.
They live side by side.
Yes.
And how do they interact financially?
We do put money toward the nonprofit journalists to do the purely public service work. So that's an obligation and a desire that we have. But the truth is that even though the tax status is for-profit on the legacy company, it's all public service work as well. So we, without charge, distribute all of our nonprofit work from ourselves and our partners that way to get the most impact.
So Kat, before we formally introduce our next guest, our next guest, Eric Newton, who is going to be sharing an amazing project that he has been working on. But maybe you could talk about how you know Eric in your capacity.
Yeah, I mean, Eric is one of those people that probably everybody in the room knows him. He's been a powerful, towering, innovative figure and believes so much. I'll be careful what I say now. But truly, the greatest gift that you can have in this field or any other is to have a tremendous mentor. And Eric has certainly been that for me in being able to walk through the tiniest of problems and then also just to think big. Like if you really didn't have resource as a problem or an impediment and you could just connect with anybody in the world, like wouldn't you want to make big things happen?
Yeah.
So Eric has been wonderful to help me do that.
That's very nice of you, Kat.
And now we will formally, Eric Newton, welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to head off. Thank you so much